Hello, and welcome back to Shrinked by Quint. Each week we delve into the intricacies of psychotherapy, dispelling myths and exploring the latest research across a broad spectrum of mental health topics. My goal is to empower you with the knowledge and insights needed to foster a healthier, happier life. Because after all, your health is your wealth. Today we're going to be looking at meaning. Almost every client I've had has asked about the meaning of it all in some way or the other. But what are they actually asking? Are they seeking an objective fact, a guiding purpose, or simply reassurance that their existence matters? A famous parable often attributed to ancient India tells of blind monks encountering an elephant. Each monk touches only one part of the elephant, a tusk, an ear, the tail, and each arrives at a different conclusion about the nature of the beast. One insists that the elephant is like a rope, another that it's like a wall, another is that it's like a tree trunk. The parable is often invoked to illustrate the limitations of subjective experience. Reality might be singular and objective, but our grasp of it is fragmentary, shaped by the narrow slice of it we happen to encounter. This is true enough, but it's one thing to disagree about the shape of an elephant. It's quite another to disagree about what something means. The question of meaning is more complicated because it isn't just about what something is, but also about its significance, its purpose, and the role it plays in our lives. Philosophers and scientists alike have long struggled with this question, whether in pursuit of fundamental truths about the universe or in efforts to understand what makes life worth living. The trouble is, meaning itself is a slippery word, used in at least three different ways. First, meaning is a denotation, the archaeologist squinting at an inscription, trying to decipher what it says. Second, meaning is purpose, when we ask what something is meant to do.
And third, meaning is significance, when we say that something means a lot to us.
The meaning of life, it turns out, could plausibly involve all three. In his 1976 British Academy lecture, Truth, Invention and the Meaning of Life, the philosopher David Wiggins observed that philosophy has mistakenly put happiness where meaning ought to have been. The mid-20th century analytic philosophers were notoriously allergic to discussions of meaning, particularly the meaning of life, because they felt such discussions were vague and muddled. And they had a point. When people ask about life's meaning, are they seeking an objective fact, a guiding purpose, or simply a reassurance that their existence matters? At the heart of this problem is the human need to make sense of things. We don't just experience events, we try to weave them into a coherent narrative. Neurologists increasingly believe we have no choice but to make a narrative of them. That's what our brain does. It's a predictive machine. A job loss isn't just a job loss. It's either a catastrophe, a sign of failure, or an opportunity for reinvention, depending on the story we tell ourselves. And this impulse to construct meaning is deeply ingrained, and arguably, it's what makes us human. We tell ourselves stories in order to live. The stories we construct about our own lives shape not only how we understand our past, but also how we act in the present and plan for the future. This is why debates about the meaning of life can feel so fraught. For my clients, they're not just abstract intellectual exercises, but deeply personal reckonings with their own existence. To say that life has no inherent meaning, for example, is not simply to state a philosophical position. It's to raise an unsettling question about whether their choices, their struggles, and their hopes ultimately matter. On the other hand, insisting that life must have a fixed universal meaning can feel just as constraining, as though there were only one correct way to live. The challenge, then, is to find a way of thinking about meaning that is both expansive and flexible, one that acknowledges our need for purpose without prescribing a single answer. Perhaps this is why legacy is so important. People find comfort in the idea. We all need to feel that our lives add up to something, that we have made a mark, that we're not simply passing through leaving no trace. This explains in part why people seek to build legacies, whether through children, work, or acts of kindness that ripple outward beyond their immediate experience. The drive to leave something behind is not just about ego, but about reassurance, the hope that some part of us will endure even after we're gone. Of course, not all legacies are grand. Some are quiet and deeply personal. A well-loved book passed down through generations, a garden tended year after year, a moment of kindness that someone remembers decades later. These too are forms of meaning. And in a way, they may be more enduring than the grander, more conspicuous forms of legacy. After all, most of us are not going to be remembered in history books. But that doesn't mean our lives are insignificant. What matters is not whether we're remembered, is it? But whether we have lived in a way that feels meaningful to us. And this is why I suggest to clients that meaning is ultimately something we create, rather than something we discover. It's not a hidden truth waiting to be uncovered, like a mathematical equation or a scientific law. It's more like a work of art, shaped by our choices, our values, and our relationships. Perhaps life has no predetermined meaning. Instead, we define it through our actions. Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. This idea can be liberating or terrifying, depending on how you look at it. On the one hand, it means there is no ultimate external authority dictating how we should live. On the other, it places the burden squarely on our shoulders. If life is to have meaning, we must be the ones to give it shape. This is not an easy task, especially in a world that often feels chaotic and indifferent. The temptation, at times, is to seek out simple answers, to latch onto a single, unchanging source of meaning. But as the parable of the blind monks groping an elephant reminds us, reality is always more complex than we can grasp from any single perspective. Meaning, like the elephant, is vast, multifaceted, and resistant to any one definition. This does not mean that meaning is an illusion, only that it is something we must continually negotiate, rather than something we can ever fully possess. Perhaps then, we should stop agonizing over a single definitive meaning of life, and instead focus on the meanings, plural, that emerge from how we choose to live. What we find meaningful may change over time, and that is not a failure, but a sign of growth. Some days meaning might be found in a grand ambition. Other days it might be found in something as simple as a shared meal or a walk in the woods. Perhaps then we should stop agonizing over a single definitive meaning of life and instead focus on the meanings, plural, that emerge from how we choose to live. What we find meaningful may change over time, and that's not a failure, but a sign of growth. Some days meaning might be found in a grand ambition. Other days it might be found in something as simple as a shared meal or a walk in the woods. The important thing is not to find the one right answer, but to remain engaged in the search. The secret of happiness is, find something more important than you are, and dedicate your life to it. Thank you for tuning in to Shrink by Quint. The parable of the blind monks reminds us that the search for meaning is, in many ways, like trying to grasp the shape of an elephant. No single perspective is sufficient. No single answer is complete. Meaning is not a puzzle to be solved, but an ongoing process, one that is enriched rather than diminished by the diversity of ways in which we approach it. And in the end, that may be the best definition of meaning we can hope for. Not a fixed truth, but a lived experience, unfolding moment by moment, shaped by the questions we ask and the choices we make along the way. But in terms of meaning, please remember, your well-being is the cornerstone of a fulfilling life, because your health truly is your wealth.